Emil Caddick here with FantasyNation.com. We have a wonderful pioneer of fantasy sports today who actually did a lot of different things we're going to talk about, but he also created a very unique fantasy style that became very popular, and it's a very big accomplishment, and he should be very honored for it. And I am very honored to introduce Geoff Stein. How you doing, Geoff?
Wonderful, wonderful. Although the word pioneer in myself, that's kind of a new one. I haven't been called a pioneer much. Just turned 37. We're recording on July 30th. Wednesday, we're recording on the 31st. So pioneer at 37, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Well, we'll find out here in a few minutes, won't we?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Way back in your youth, were you interested in sports or football?
Oh, always. You know, it's kind of a crazy story. I was an only child, and I kind of grew up in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, so there weren't any other kids around. So basically, middle of nowhere, we didn't have cable television. We had too many trees around to get a satellite dish, so we got over-the-air television. And some of my first memories, period, are watching the old Detroit Tigers about 1990 with my dad on an old black and white television upstairs that he had in his bedroom. That was the only one we could get the Tigers on. They came on TV 9 and 10, Cadillac, Michigan. That's back before every game was on cable, you know. So that was a great season. That was a season Cecil Fielder hit 51 home runs, which hadn't been done in 20-something years. Now 51 home runs is nothing. There's a couple guys that hit 50 home runs a year. But in 1990, that was a big deal again. So getting to watch that every night, that was such a big, huge deal. That kind of got my interest in sports. And again, so no brothers and sisters, no kids around. I watched a lot of TV, played a lot of video games. But the TV, again, we didn't have cable. So again, come Saturday, Sunday, we got like 3 or 4 channels. Again, like nowadays, I just set up a over-the-air television for my dad, and he got, 10, 15 channels at his house. Then we got 3 or 4. And on a Saturday or Sunday, what was on? 2 of the 3 channels had football games, and the other one was the home shopping channel. So kind of a sports fan from an early age, just because there was nothing else to do a lot of the time. But again, I love playing baseball. I loved watching baseball, and then again, and come fall, it was football time. So that's where my love of sports really started, was watching those baseball games on that old TV with Dad.
That's pretty neat. Were you a Detroit Lion fan then?
No, they were bad even back then. Even I knew to avoid those bums back then. But getting to watch Barry Sanders was always fun. When I would go to school on Monday, everyone was doing their best Barry move from the weekend. So it was fun to watch him. But I was a Barry fan, but not a Lions fan, which was a good difference to make even back then.
Started your fantasy feel even back then. So you went to Grand Valley State University?
Yes, sir. Grand Valley State University in Allendale, Michigan. Started there in the fall of 2001. So again, what a crazy time to be starting school. I'll never forget one of my first days of classes was the September 11th attack. And again, it's weird the stuff you remember. But I remember staying up late the Monday before watching, I think it was the Redskins and the Eagles. Someone can fact check me on this. I remember Jeff George. I think I had Jeff George as my fantasy quarterback that Monday night before. So staying up late in college at night, right, September 11th attacks. Typical college kid. I stayed up late watching Monday Night Football, probably hung out playing some video games afterwards. And then on September 11th, I woke up at like 11 o'clock in the morning when everything has happened. And it was kind of like a zombie world, just walking around like, hey, what's going on today? I was kind of in a bad mood because I don't think Jeff George had a very good game that night. so just one of the crazy, again, sports, I talk about one of my first memories, watching those games with Dad. And just crazy the memories you have, and crazy how football played a role in that historic date for me.
Yeah, that is interesting. So you got a bachelor's degree in broadcasting.
Yeah. I wanted to be on sports radio back in, I apologize. I wanted to be in sports radio back then. I used to listen to it like crazy. We get the 670 AM here in Michigan. It comes across the lake. That's from Chicago. I was a big Chicago fan back then, the Cubs, the Bears, so I would listen to that quite a bit. There were local shows in Grand Rapids I would always call into, but yeah, when I went to school, the goal was always to be on sports radio. I wanted to do something in sports, but radio was the ultimate goal, and here we are, 19 years later and 20 years later, and I'm doing it, so it's been an incredible blessing. It's been an incredible journey. What a life so far.
Good. So when you were in high school or when you were in college, did you do any sports talk or sports radio at that time while you were getting your degree?
It's kind of a crazy story. My sophomore year of college is when I went to the Grand Valley State University job board, and I always say all that money I paid to go to school, the most valuable thing I got out of it was the link to this job board. I went there, and I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit here, and there was an ad for a fantasy sports writer for a company here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, near Grand Valley State. And I said, oh my gosh, my eyes just lit up. I wasn't working at the time, just doing your typical college, being a lazy college student. But I seen a job site our job ad for this board, and I said, man, oh man, that would be awesome. It was a part-time gig. I think it paid minimum wage, it said. And I'm like, I have no shot at this. Everyone and their mother is going to be applying for this job. But I said, you know what? I have to do it. I have to ride this guy hard. I want this job. I'll do anything to have this job. And that's when I sent him, my resume. I just hounded, this is Jason Plimmel, who obviously, Emil, you've met many times. He's not in the industry any longer, but he was running a site called Mock Draft Central. And again, it's just funny how it works. Funny thinking of that. When I seen that job ad, it was just like a movie, how where you see that brick of gold and it's just like glowing, or the Holy Grail, and it's just got like that shine on it. And I was looking at that computer screen that day, and I seen fantasy sports writer. I said, I have to have this job. I was looking for a part-time. I was on the job site, obviously. I was looking for a part-time fantasy sports writer, or work cleaning up a cafeteria somewhere on campus. Which one sounds better to you?
Yeah.
So
did you meet him right then?
That's how my crazy.
So this board, was this board thing on the internet, or did you actually meet him in person initially?
Yeah.
On the internet?
Yeah. No, it was a posting on a website, but it was the bunch again, it was mostly on campus jobs, cleaning toilets or picking up trays at the cafeteria, stuff like that.
Here, take a look at this.
And
I don't know if you can see the monitor.
No, it's a little behind, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's 2002's Mock Draft Central website.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now I see it. Oh my God. Holy cow. Oh, man.
I don't know if you can read, but what was your byline, or your whatever you call it, the company's
2002.
motto.
That's even before I got there. Holy cow! But it had the same design to it. But man, oh man,
you guys modified it over the year. Your tagline was "Participate or Dominate." It's on that little thing right there.
Yeah, that stuck around for many years afterwards. That was around there. This is from 2002. Yeah, I think that's around when I started there, 2003, 2004. Mm-hmm. Boy, that brings back memories. Where did you find that at? Some internet? That's got to be in the deepest, darkest pits of the internet right there.
Archive.org. It's one of the greatest storage of internet stuff way back to about 1996-ish. But yeah, I'm going to have to go. I remember Plimmel. I probably wouldn't recognize the guy if I saw him, but I remember Plimmel quite well.
Boy, I'm going to have to go to that Internet Archive. That's going to be the rest of my night, just going through and looking at stuff on there. That seems like a very dangerous path to start down, because there's got to be some good stuff out there.
There's a lot of great stuff. So that's a fantastic start. And of course, Mock Draft Central was one of the original, if not the original mock draft site. Do you recall any competition back then, or?
No, I mean, even when I was looking it up after that job posting, I kind of looked at it and I said, wait a minute, these don't count, because I was in fantasy leagues. I said, wait, they don't play these leagues out. This isn't something that you're going to get a winner or a loser out of. It's practice, the Allen Iverson practice. It didn't make a lot of sense to me even then, but I wasn't going to complain if they were going to give me a job. And look at what it is now. It's like huge business. But to me, it didn't make sense at the time. And mind you, again, this was in the very, very early days of fantasy on the internet compared to where we are now. But
Yes.
yeah. I remember looking at some results. I'm like, wait a minute, these are just people putting together teams that don't count, that don't matter. Again, practice.
Practice.
It didn't make a lot of sense to me.
And of course, they're becoming even huger. I noticed, I think you guys did multiple sports. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Every sport. Baseball and football, obviously, were the biggest ones. A little bit of hockey, a little bit of basketball, but just like today, season-long basketball, season-long hockey, not much of a market for those. But we did it all. I think we even did some golf. And, maybe even college football. I remember we did some college football. We hosted there was a company called U Sports out of Nashville, Tennessee.
I remember that.
I don't know if you remember them.
Yes.
But they had the commissioner software, but not the draft software. So they added players to our database, and we hosted leagues for them, or hosted drafts for them, and they hosted the leagues. And I remember one of my favorite leagues I did every year was a college fantasy league that they invited me to participate in, a college football fantasy league.
Wow. To
this day, I enjoy playing the college fantasy sports, mostly the daily variety on DraftKings, FanDuel, and all that. But I'm a big college football fan. That's probably my favorite sport. Nothing like sitting down on a Saturday, sitting down at noon on Saturday and just watching a good 12, 13 hours of college football. Even though we were talking beforehand, I have a newborn 7-week-old. She just turned 7 weeks today. So we'll see how many of those 13-hour fantasy or 13-hour college football days I get this year. I'm thinking it might be a little less, might be cut down a little bit, but that's not going to keep me from trying at least.
Yeah, that's a whole new world. When they go to sleep, you think, oh, good, I got time now. And you're thinking, wait a minute. They're going to wake up at 2 a.m, and it'd be nice if I was somewhat rested. So you're fighting your mind. Do I go to sleep too, or do I go have some fun watching TV or doing something? Because they'll get you in the end, those kids.
She wins every time, but she's worth it.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. So how did that end? How did you leave Mock Draft Central? I think they sold too. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. You mentioned, and we mentioned, there is no such thing as mock drafting, really. I mentioned how confused I was. I worked there for a good 5 or 6 years, and Jason and I, it was just him and I most of the time. We had a programmer we had for a little while and some part-time workers we'd bring on this time of year in the summertime to help out with the load. But for the most part, we were the only game in town. But I'll never forget the first time we seen ESPN was going to start offering free mock drafting. And mind you, Mock Draft Central was a pay site where, you got to do unlimited mock drafts. We charged, and that's how we made money was charging the mock draft. But then, lo and behold, ESPN offered free mock drafting, and that's kind of when the writing was on the wall that, how do we compete with that? Jason and I in a little old cold office in Grand Rapids taking on big bad ESPN. And like I said, the company was profitable, and we had obviously a pretty good database. I think by the time we sold, we had over close to 200,000 email addresses that signed up at some point.
Wow. And
that was valuable back then. It's valuable now.
Yeah,
but
no doubt.
But the company was sold to RotoWire in Madison, Wisconsin, and that was before the whole quarantine and all that. That's before the work from home thing was a big thing. That's before it was normal. And I talked to Peter Schenke, the president of RotoWire, and he basically just straight up said, would you be interested in moving to Madison, Wisconsin? And I had no interest at the time. I was just in the process of buying a house. just bought a house, had a pretty serious girlfriend at the time. Moving to Madison just wasn't on board, or wasn't an option. So I said, I had discussions with other people in the industry, and I kind of knew that there was some potential offers out there. So, Peter ran RotoWire. He had a ton of employees there. To this day, they're still a pretty large company by fantasy sports perspective. So we just left it at that, and said, just not going to work. I was sad that day, obviously, you put your blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of hard work, a lot of hard hours into something, which we did at the Mock Draft Central. And again, it kind of goes back to how I said I need this job back when I seen it on the posting on that job board. I told Jason, I went in the interview with him, I said, you won't regret this. I'll work harder than anyone. I'll work smarter than anyone. And he chose me, thankfully, and I like to think that I kept my word. I like to think I worked harder, worked smarter. Obviously, I'm still sitting here today, so I did something right. You can see me on the screen. It wasn't my good looks that got me this far.
So you guys
just
sold
one of those things.
What ended up? What was their next step in fantasy sports after that?
What was my next step?
Yeah.
I did a lot of work at the time with Greg Ambrosius and Tom Kesenick. They licensed out our software at Mock Draft Central for their contest, the National Fantasy Baseball Championship, National Fantasy Football Championship. So again, I always worked hard for them. I always worked smart for those guys. And at the time, they were just purchased. Their contest, they were with a magazine publisher, which I'm sure you knew. And they were purchased by Fanball, which was at the time, there's a Fanball now, but at the time there was a Fanball that was owned and operated by Liberty Media, which is some billion-dollar conglomerate at the time. I don't even know what they have anymore. At the time they owned DirecTV, the Atlanta Braves, and all that. But they just purchased Greg and Tom's contest, and I think they paid some decent money for it. And I remember reaching out to Greg and Tom at the time and said, look, I may be available. Do you think there's a spot for me at Fanball? And, Fanball was a huge thing at the time. They did their own magazines, again, as I'm sure you knew. They had their own content website. They ran their own games in addition to the high-stakes stuff. And I reached out to Greg and Tom, and I said, look, I know your contest better than anyone other than you two. I certainly know it better than anyone at Fanball. And, I did a bunch of writing at the time. Again, you might see my shelf right here. I have all the magazines I ever wrote anything in. It's been a long time since I've written. Well, I'll never forget that. Again, going back a few years, I'm sorry to go back, but I'll never forget that first time I seen something that I wrote in a magazine. That was like the coolest thing ever. And obviously I've been in a lot of your stuff, Emil. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Don't know how bright-eyed it is. And even to this day, I'll do a mock draft every now and then where I'll hop in and just seeing your name in print. I can't wait to show these to my little girl someday. She'll probably just roll her eyes at me and be like, what's a magazine? But
that'll be a fun day.
But, yeah. That's a ways off still. But yeah, I got again, the drawer full of them here. But anyway, I was kind of a multi-threat, a utility man, using sports terms, a baseball term. I did a little bit of the high-stakes stuff. People trusted me. People recognized it. And going back to your days from the WCOF, these guys that spend tens of thousands of dollars a year, if they have someone they can trust that knows what they're doing, that's really quite valuable, I think. Obviously,
Yes.
and they trusted Greg and Tom, but they knew me from Mock Draft Central. I was the guy calling and saying, hey, you're not in your league right now. Or
Where are you? Get your butt into the league.
Yeah, where are you? Yeah, I can't even tell you how many times, we'd be doing these 20-round drafts, and the guy was having some kind of connection issue, and I'd have to call him each time he was on the clock to tell him who went. And so I developed a good relationship with the customers of the high-stakes games. And again, then I offered stuff like writing, customer support type stuff. And so I got the job at Fanball once I left Mock Draft Central. Again, I've been working. That's when I started working from home. Again, that wasn't quite normal at the time. They had an office in St. Louis, just outside of St. Louis. But for the most part, I worked from home. We had the Google Chat at the time, company Google Chat. But it was a big change to start working from home after there was an actual mock draft central office. But then starting to work from home, to actually like wake up every morning, and again, this is way before these quarantine days, and like I laugh at all my friends now that, I've been working from home since this virus stuff started. You got any hints for me? And number one is just make sure you change your clothes, because that's like the big one. Just don't work all day in the stuff you slept in. I would say that's the biggest advice I've had for them, and they're starting to get around to it, and it took me a while, but yeah, working with Fanball, again, like a huge company, going from little old mock draft central where it's just Jason and I in a little office to a company owned by Liberty Media, where you go to this office in St. Louis and there's desk everywhere and dividers everywhere and offices everywhere. It was quite the change and quite the difference. Not something I was really a fan of, to be honest with you. The whole corporate side of it.
You saw it was big differences there.
Oh, I saw some huge differences, and I'll never forget walking into that office for the first time. Everyone there is doing fantasy sports for a living. I kind of thought it'd be like, you remember the old ESPN Sports Center commercials where there's just like a bunch of mascots and stuff walking around and, athletes everywhere. And I walked into this office that first day, and I'll never forget, everyone just looked so sad and so beaten down and so depressed.
Really?
And I'm like, wait a minute, we're doing fantasy sports for a living here. Why is, how many people would love to do this job?
Yeah.
And it was quite strange to me. I was shocked to see, and I guess that should have been my first sign of what was to come. Because you know where this story ends, and I'm sure we'll get there. But yeah, it just wasn't what I expected at all, to be honest with you. And obviously, that version of Fanball is no longer around. And I guess there's a pretty good reason for that.
Did they, I forget exactly, there was multiple things, and I'm not sure which one you were involved in, but did Liberty, I forget whether that was when they went bankrupt, or Liberty just decided they didn't want to be in that business anymore?
Liberty just pretty much pulled the plug on them overall. I obviously don't know the financials or anything, but it was losing money from what I understood. I'll never forget. It was I think it was around, these years melt together now, Emil, but I think it's the new year going from 2010 to 2011. There kind of was the rumor that Liberty might pull the plug on it. But when we made it to the new year, I think we were all kind of relieved and said, okay, well, they would have pulled the plug. If they were going to pull the plug, they would have, before January 1st of the new year. So I'll never forget on New Year's Eve, or New Year's Eve and the New Year's that year. So, it was kind of a relief. Like there was, on my back, on my chest, just saying, okay, well, we survived. I still wasn't thrilled with how things were run or my position at the company, but lo and behold, I thought we survived. And then I'll never forget, it was around January 8th, the famous G chat I mentioned. I got a message from Tom Kesenick, just said, Liberty just pulled the plug. And I'm like, oh, and again, like my eyes, like I thought we were safe. It went from worrying about it to feeling relieved about it to it's gone. They're not. Yeah. And I said to myself, oh, well, what am I going to do? I've been doing fantasy sports. I've been working from home. My life's about to change big time. And that's when I started making phone calls again. Emil, you know how these it's a lot different than it used to be, but these old FSTA, it'll always be the FSTA for me. I don't even think I can call it the FSGA. Yeah. These old FSTA conferences back in the day, everyone was such good friends with each other. You and I mean, we always had nice times there, talking and hanging out. You went to the karaoke the one night with us, right? Did you?
Yes. Yeah. One time I've done karaoke in my life. I did Harry Chapin, whatever the name of the song was. I can sing it, but I can't remember the name of the song. I stunned the crap out of you guys.
You have the
Luckily,
voice of an angel.
Luckily, you guys didn't record me. I'd had to show it to my kids. But that
You know,
was fun.
I think
It was
I
a good
have.
time.
I think I have pictures on an old cell phone somewhere.
Yeah.
But
If you
again,
haven't sent them
hello
to
to
me,
my
it's pretty
friend.
funny. We had a good
Hello to
time
our
that
friend
night.
Scott Engel, the karaoke king, the FSTA karaoke king. But yeah, you know, we'd go to these conferences and we'd make good friends and good acquaintances. And again, when I worked at Monster F Central, I worked with a lot of different people in the industry directly because a lot of people licensed out our software.
Yeah.
And just talking to people at these conferences, I got to know quite a few people. And that's one of the first people I reached out to when I heard Fanball was going under. And to be honest with you, I think I might have even reached out to him while Fanball was going still, was Mike Hall at my fantasy league. I always respected him. And when I viewed my fantasy league from afar, it kind of reminded me a lot of what we had at Mock Draft Central that I appreciated, and that just the job environment that I liked. You know, close guys that were close together. Not a lot of the corporate stuff. Again, going back to the whole Fanball zombie thing. Just guys that seemed to enjoy what they did. That when I talked to them at the FSTA conferences, they always seemed happy. Their product was amazing. They had their own little niche, kind of like Mock Draft Central did. Their own spot in the industry. They were respected. So I reached out to Mike, and he said, you know, and he didn't say no, which was the best I could ask for at the time. You know, I mean, you've been doing this for longer than I have. Getting a full-time job in the fantasy sports industry is hard, not easy to do. There's not a lot of them out there. And I was looking to go for my third one in a little less than 2 years, 3 years. So I wasn't expecting anything. And lo and behold, Mike said, you know, let's talk. And I'll never forget that. I put together a little sheet for him where I think I could help. You know, obviously, again, I kind of viewed myself as a utility man. And, you know, they never hosted any kind of leagues of their own, any kind of pay leagues. They had the software to do so. I remember putting that on there. I can't, some kind of content, even their social media, all kinds of stuff. I don't even remember. That was a mile-long list of stuff I had for them.
That's good.
I think half of it was probably bullshit, but lo and behold, they took a chance on me, and I, again, that was I've been incredibly blessed, incredibly lucky on this journey. That was at the time where the NFL labor situation was a big thing. I don't think they even settled it till what? Probably about this time of that year. What was that, 2011, I want to say?
It's 2011. Yeah.
I think it was right around July 31st, August 1st, they settled it.
Yeah, it took a while.
And, you know, it took a long while. I remember we were all scared then. So, and again, that played into the whole fear I had of finding a job is the Golden Goose fantasy football. There was no sure thing it was even going to happen that year. Mm-hmm. And so when I reached out to my fantasy league and they said maybe, you know, my fantasy league is football only. You know, we talked about the Mock Draft Central where it's baseball, basketball, hockey, football, college football. My fantasy league is NFL football only. And so for them to take a chance on me that they did, I got incredibly lucky. And to this day, I still don't know what the hell they were thinking, but I'm glad they did it.
That's fantastic. Did you ever work a lot, or was Kevin Austin still involved at that point?
Yeah, Kevin was still there. It was Kevin, Mike, Tony Holm. Mike and Tony are still around. And Julie, who's the customer support lady. And, of course, Kevin. What a great guy. And Kevin was one of the guys I got to know at the FSTA conferences. And I think you can vouch for it. It's just not me working with them. Just what a great guy. Always had a smile on his face. Such a positive way of looking at life.
Yeah.
Just one of those guys that you would never know when he was mad, never know when he was upset by something. Just always had a smile on his face, and such a great guy. And unfortunately, he passed away. Again, these years melt together so bad. I want to say around 2015. He was in his mid to late 40s. Just horrible situation.
Yeah.
And we miss him. We miss him a ton. He had two little girls who are doing wonderful at the time, are doing wonderful now. It was
Good.
tough on them at the time, but I last I heard they're both in college now and doing incredibly well. I had a chance to meet him when we went out for his services in around 2015, and just, man, what impressive children. And it speaks to what kind of guy he was.
Yeah, he was. It's when people pass away, everybody says, "Oh, the guy was a great guy," but this is really true. He was really a great guy, and the things he did with his business and with his family. He's always doing stuff with his family, and I'd call him with a question on his phone, and he was out, riding bikes with his family. He says, "Hey, I'll be back in a couple minutes. I'll pop in there." And yeah, he's a great guy. He was really one of the pioneers too, and I wish I could interview him, or maybe you can tell me later. We can do a separate interview. Is Mike doesn't really want to be interviewed, so I can't get him unless I can convince him. And Kevin's gone, because I know they came together at some point in the 90s, because they were both creating a commissioner product, and I kind of want to understand how that all worked. But I know both of them were very much pioneers creating software, and they didn't have a big company that was employing them, that they were doing it on sweat equity and on their own. And I think those are the important things that I'm trying to get with this Pioneer Series, is the people that actually, are working in their garages or in their studies or working at night or working on weekends, that actually had to put risk out there on their careers to create the things that we have now, the technologies that we have now. He was a great guy. Typically, I forget it's already happened. Usually I go on his Facebook and say hi to him on his passing time. And in one of the magazines, we always put a little picture of him in the index with his wife on the beach, saying we miss him. But we really do miss him. He was a great guy. It's really sad.
No. And like you said, it goes way back to the 90s when him and Mike met up. And, even as an employee, like, every time I hear the story, it's amazing to me. It would be kind of cool if we could get together. Maybe you can get Mike. Maybe we can convince him. Maybe we can nudge him to talk about it, because it is such a wonderful story. And here the site is, 25, 30 years later, still going strong, still growing every year, still employing dopes like me. It's
No, you called yourself.
It's a great story, and like you said, it's what this industry is all about to me. Like I said, when my fantasy league reminded me of a lot of the company that I helped grow, helped build, Mock Dress Central at the time. And now I've been, here we are all these years later, and I've been with my fantasy league longer than I was with Mock Dress Central. So to me, all these years later, here we are still going. And man, I've said it a million times now, but these years just melt together so fast, Emil. How have we been doing this? How have we been doing the fantasy sports stuff this long? My goodness gracious.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And by the way, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but at the beginning I talked about something you created that's become very huge, and that was MFL 10s. You want to tell everybody about MFL 10s?
Well, sure, yeah. And I mentioned that sheet that I put together for when they interviewed me, where I might be able to help out. And I noticed the inefficiency in the fantasy sports market. You had the WCOF, I mentioned the NFFC and stuff, which I worked with, but there was never really a good lower level league where you could get a decent payout. I think the cheapest the WCOF offered was like $125, probably a satellite league around there.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's about what Greg's contest offered at the time. And I know CBS Sports offered some cheaper leagues, but it was like $10 for a 10, 12 team league, and you'd get $20 if you won it. So just terrible odds. And one of the ideas I always said is there's just such an inefficiency in this market. There's no $10 leagues. There's no $20 leagues where you can get a decent payout. And that's kind of what I pitched them for. And that's kind of where the whole MFL 10 thing started. I said, what if we just do $10 to win 100? I think that'd be huge. Who doesn't think they can win? If you enter 10 fantasy leagues, all you got to do is win one to get your money back.
Yeah.
To get your $100 back. And if you win two, there's profit. And that was always kind of my thought on it, just to get people hooked. And they started out as MFL 10s. The idea I had when they started out was as leagues with transactions where you pick up players where, you set a lineup each week. And somewhere along the line, I think it was Mike or maybe a customer said, why don't you offer these as a best ball? I do a ton of these. The best ball, we called them, we called them draft-only leagues at the time. Again, they said, I do a lot more of these if I didn't have to worry about setting a lineup or picking people up. And I think we can all agree, the best part about fantasy sports is drafting, especially football. I mean, who wants to sit there on Sunday morning and read all the news and, and like pick up a backup kicker every week or have to set a lineup? You forget. Life gets busy, especially when you get to that. Of course, you're like wide-eyed and all happy early on. But, when you get to those November or December when they start and you forget to set a lineup and you hate yourself for doing so. Or even people fall off and just quit caring. So that's where kind of, MFL had the draft only, the best ball software. And, it's almost like it took off overnight. We never expected it to be what it became. Obviously, you say MFL 10s. I think most people that know fantasy football know what an MFL 10 was. And we had a real good. One of my other main jobs is I run the MFL Twitter. If I'm on there, my wife, I should get her in here to yell right now because I'm on that thing. And even driving, she gets so mad at me when I check the MFL Twitter while I'm driving. Now I don't do it anymore ever since she got pregnant and we had the 7-week-old. Don't think I'm not driving her. I have given up that concession where I'm not checking the MFL Twitter while I drive. Stoplights, maybe every now and then at a stoplight. But
all right, we'll let you do that.
But I think the Twitter aspect of it, the social media, is really what helped the MFL 10 format take off. People were talking about these like, hey, I just drafted this team. And again, they were all slow drafts too. I think that's like a big part that we have to mention is it was 8 hours per pick. It wasn't you had to sit down and make all your selections at once. Because it's difficult to say, okay, it's difficult for people to rope off an hour and a half, 2 hours to do a draft. But if you say, hey, you get an email saying, hey, you're on the clock, and you can just hop in real quick and make a pick. And we started doing these right around the time where everyone was having, cell phones where you can get internet on, the iPhones and all that. Even just thinking about that, how far technology has come since we've been doing this. I mean, when I started doing this all these years ago at Mock Draft Central, heck, even thinking about, 2009, 2010, the fact that someone could have a little computer in their hand where they could make their fantasy pick no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing. I mean, that was crazy to think about 10, 15 years ago. But, I think that technological advance helped with the MFL 10s. Again, the fact that people could make their pick wherever they were, whatever they were doing. And they just took off. They just exploded. We never expected it to be what they became. And,
well, I tell you what, you should be real proud because it's interesting how people have evolved and the sport has evolved. And obviously you pointed out that drafts are kind of the most fun part. And the more you can be involved in a draft, the better. And that's what best ball does for you. And so you can compete. Now you can compete in a best ball for money and against other people. And the slow drafts is another interesting psychology is you want that draft to last. It's fun. So you're sitting there and you're driving, you're going to work and your phone beeps and you're going, oh, hey, so-and-so drafted. I got 4 more picks. Oh, he took that so-and-so. Oh, yeah, good. I still got my guy. And you can soak this up for 7 to 10 days. And, of course, as you know, people like that I know, Jen Ryan and Mike Dempsey and a million others, they played hundreds of best balls a year. Hundreds.
When I mentioned Jen is one of the ones, when I mentioned the Twitter, she was one of the ones that her popularity really took off. And I am at, that's how she became so popular. Well, she was the MFL 10s, like you said, doing hundreds at a time. And here she is all these years later, still doing work for you, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how she got her start. I think she played fantasy football, and then she started talking about them. There was a real tight core group on the MFL 10 Twitter that just really helped it explode. And again, I don't think we ever expected it to get into the levels it did. And you mentioned, the drafting part of it. And that was the wonderful part about the slow draft too, is people would say, well, I can do 5 of these at once. I can do 4 of these at once. It was easy to do. And one of my main gigs with them, let me rewind a minute. At first, I would physically put each team into the first year we did them. I would physically put each team into the system. I'd get an email, and I remember being at a concert one time. I went and seen Kenny Chesney at Ford Field in Detroit, and I had a little. The mobile hotspot was a thing back then. It wasn't a phone. It was like a little box. And I'm sitting there at tailgate, and like it's like the middle of August, so right before right when everything's exploding, and I'm sitting there putting MFL 10 team. I'm like, gosh, how did these get so popular? Like, I'm trying to enjoy myself, trying to have some beers and getting to go to a concert. And I'm sitting in the parking lot trying to make sure I get these drafts created before I went in. Then I went into the concert and I checked when I got out, and there's like 200 and something more entries waiting for me. And thankfully, we automated it the year after that. But that first year, I bit off a little more than I could chew, I think.
Well, it's a fantastic creation that you did, and making it best ball. It's so sweet. Now, of course, you guys ended up selling it, sadly, but I mean, obviously, that you created it and you had it. And Can you tell me a little about why you decided to sell it?
Yeah, we just had to, based on, that's when the DFS, right around the time the DFS exploded as well.
Yeah.
And the regulations started. And again, I talk about how we're not corporate. And it kind of goes to where we're at as a nation right now. Instead of one big federal law that we probably could have handled, we probably could have kept them, and we probably could have pulled it off if there was a federal fantasy law. But it became each state doing their own thing. And that just became impossible. For a group of five people to have 50 different sets of rules and regulations you had to follow. And that doesn't even count. I think the first states were Indiana, and I think it was Maryland, that wanted $50,000 entry fee. They see these DraftKings commercials on TV where it said, win $1 million this weekend. And they you know how government is. Their eyes got, ooh, big. Like, oh, here we go. We're gonna fix our budget issues. There's a lot of money to be made in fantasy sports, obviously. But there was 2 sites. There was FanDuel and DraftKings that they could have made the money off of. For us, that was giving away $100 off a $10 entry. Like I said, $50,000 in Indiana and Maryland. I don't think we did $50,000 before we paid out in those states.
Well, you were dealing with you were doing a low budget leagues. And
So
that doesn't work well and it's not $50,000. It's $50,000 a year.
A year, yes. That's a big part of it. In addition, technology stuff. I know some states require the location technology, which, we were doing $10 leagues that paid out $100. It doesn't take a mathematician to figure out the margins we were working on were pretty slim. And I think, that's what made it popular, is the payouts and all that. And there was just no way to run it as is anymore. And I guess, a lot of it hasn't been as bad as we anticipated, but I think now that, the states are starting to go into the gambling side of things, I think you're going to see fantasy sports get bunched up in there a lot with these pay games. So that could get ugly, but it hasn't been as ugly in the more recent years that I thought it would be, and we thought it would be. But I mean, again, we have states like New York, which was one of our bigger states. I know Pennsylvania, all that kind of stuff. They have reasonable rules, but just stuff we couldn't keep up with. It was impossible for a small company to keep up with 50 different sets of regulations in addition to running the commissioner product that we have. You know what I mean?
It's too much.
So we sold them off to Sports Hub Technology, who, ironically enough, own the NFBC and NFFC, which I did a lot of work for back in the Fanball Mock Draft Central days. They kind of rolled up a lot of these companies and a lot of these games under one license, which makes sense. They do the whole 50 different state things.
Mm-hmm.
They do it well from everything I can tell. But nothing we'd be able to do. And, we made decent money. Obviously, we had the name recognition, the MFL 10 name recognition, and just obviously we had quite the list of people willing to pay money to play fantasy football. So that was valuable to them. So I miss them. I wish we still had them. But, just where we're at, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, and it made sense for them, too, because they were having to pay those states for their high-stakes contests. So why not throw a low-stakes contest in that is popular? It's best ball, so people play a bunch of them, and then you may be able to farm some of those people into their high-stakes contests. So it makes a lot of sense they did that. So
yeah, and they were...
go ahead.
They were a newer company at the time as well. Like I said, Fanball, the rebirth of Fanball, they were just coming back, so... What a way to get their name out there at the time, too, is just to
smart
say,
idea.
hey, look, we got one of the more popular fantasy football games going now.
Yeah. So who created Fantasy Best Ball?
Oh, man, some real handsome guy. Good-looking guy. I can't remember. Amo something? Amo Cadlack? Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. 1998. Anyway, sorry, that was petty. But I love best ball. I haven't played.
Thank you. I bow down before you. Thank you for that, sir.
It's a funny story because I was in FanX in 98, and we did it on my fantasy league at the time. And that's probably why they created the best ball option as we started doing it. And it wasn't what it was Terry Cannon in FanX was the commissioner. So Tuesday morning he would go in and just pick the best lineup. It wasn't part of the software. But they wanted to do another league. How funny it is now. Back in FanX, we did one league in slow draft for showing everybody, and we'd have comments and all that stuff. And they said, let's do 2 leagues this year. Oh, that's too much work. And so we said, well, let's do a mock. And they said, no, mock's not real. I said, well, let's do this. Let's do a league. And on Tuesday morning, we'll have Terry just pick the best lineup. Let's don't do any free agency. And then we don't have to work at it. And they go, oh, all right, let's try that. And we called it the FAD, the Fantasy Analysis Draft, which is probably still around now. And that was best.
Oh, yeah, it's still going.
But it's how it's evolved is what's incredible because of technology and the joy of the draft, as you pointed out. That best ball is just gone nuts. I mean, tons of companies do it now. And I wish I did more. I haven't had a lot of time. The last couple of years I've been developing new content and new ideas. And it's almost like I want to retire so I can start playing fantasy football again.
Yeah, funny how that works, ain't it?
Yeah, it's too busy. You're just, I'll have a few leagues I'm in, and I'm like, how do you do? I do okay. I mean, I don't even do free agents till week 3 or 4 because I just don't have the time. You can't, I don't have the time to really run it as well as I do, which of course which helps for best ball. But if I don't have time to do best balls in August, then that's the end of that. But that's fantastic.
No doubt.
So you've been working with Sideline Software since 2011, essentially, huh?
Wow. Yeah. Again, where does time go? 9 years? 9+ years. My goodness.
Have you ever talked to Jason Plemmel much?
Yeah, we have lunch every now and then. It's been a while, but he's still around in the area, and there's so many stories. Just working at a small company. I'll never forget. Talking about the FSTA. We drove from Michigan to Florida for the one in Tampa. Gosh, what year was that? About 2009, probably. I want to say January 2009. It was the year the Super Bowl was in Tampa, the Arizona Pittsburgh Super Bowl.
Yeah,
and just that trip down, driving from Michigan to Florida, and there was they could have made a movie about that trip probably.
Tell me
some of the crazy stuff we did. I don't know. My wife might watch this, but
we may not want it.
Yeah,
I remember him well.
But,
Jason seemed to be a really nice guy, and I always enjoyed him. I probably wouldn't recognize him if I saw him because it's been so many years, but he seemed like a really good person and a hard worker.
No, great dude. He's running another. He's got that entrepreneur spirit. He's running another company, pretty close to where I live now. Like I said, it's been a while since to him, but we're definitely due for a lunch. I might have to give him a call when I
Tell
hop
him I
off
said
here.
hi. I may go, but I found his company on the internet. I forget what it's called, but it was it helps you run your business or answer phones.
Yes,
I
yes.
forget the exact
Mm-hmm.
name of it, but yeah, he called himself serial entrepreneur on his little bio there, which is probably pretty appropriate.
That sounds right. The dude's a hustler. He's not, and not in a bad way. Like, he's always hustling. I guess that was a bad term of putting it, but he's always up to something, and he's always one step ahead. It seems. Real smart dude and a great guy. And he started as my boss, and he ended as my friend. And
that usually doesn't.
And I owe it all to him again. When we talk about that email I sent off in 2003, 2004. I never would have guessed it. It would have been someone that I'd still know all these years later. Yeah. And what a blessing that guy chose me. And I'll never forget that interview where I don't want to say I begged for the job, but it was pretty darn close.
Was this a one-on-one where you actually met person to person?
Yeah. Yep. I'll never forget the cold. It was a cold, gray, I want to say February, Michigan day, which most of them are. In February, cold and gray, and this little tiny office that was hidden. It took me a minute to find it, and I got there super early, and he was interviewing an accountant. He was going to use an accountant firm, and I got there early, so I'm like, oh gosh, I felt like such a dope for walking in while he was interviewing someone else. And then, I mean, it was a small office. Again, it was just like a studio type office with desk and stuff in it, where it wasn't him in his office interviewing this guy. I just walked into this place, and he's interviewing someone else, and he said, oh, can you give me 10, 20 minutes? And I said, oh, gosh, I probably just blew my chance right there by interrupting that. But lo and behold, maybe it was my punctuality that got me the gig, because here we are 20 years later, 20-something, close to 20 years later. I'm talking to one of the legends in the industry, Mr. Emil Cadleck, and what a ride it's been. I've been incredibly, I use the word blessed. Who wouldn't be blessed to wake up every day, do something they love? And obviously, I was just telling my wife before I hopped on, tomorrow's August, and these next 6 weeks are absolute hell. And I know it's probably a little different from you when you get the magazine deadlines and stuff coming up. But just, this is when, we have, MFL is fantasy football 24/7, 365. We have our diehards that, Our sites are available all year. That's one of the things that makes MFL stand out, is you can hop on your fantasy football site in February if you want, in March, when other sites are moving to baseball, basketball. MFL is there for football for you. So we've had people on the site for the past 9 months, 8 months, but it's really, really, really about to get real busy. and in addition to that 7-week-old. Boy, I'd buy some stocks in caffeine companies, because all will break loose.
Well, it's funny on your Twitter, because you got a lot of dynasty players, and those people don't. It's a 12-month season for them. They can't stop talking about trades and everything else. It's incredible how in depth those guys get, and which works well for you guys. Now, you also were on the board of the FSTA. Was it 09? Yeah, 09.
For a little while back. Again, that kind of, I would say I'm probably the youngest. I think I was the youngest member at the time ever. Uh-huh. I don't know what's happened since then. And again, we kind of, when we talked about it, I was 20 years old when I started this. This has been me turning into a man. This industry has been a part of it. Which is kind of crazy to think about. I think about those FSTA conferences, and I was always the young guy, like hustling up guys my age now. Like, hey, let's go out tonight. We're in Vegas. Why are you going back to the hotel room? Let's go drink. Let's go look at some ladies somewhere. Yeah, let's go karaoke. Exactly right. Let's go karaoke. And now we were just at the one in Vegas this past January before all this craziness, and I think I was in bed at 10 o'clock. It's just, it's just amazing how, it's amazing how long this has been a part of my life.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I've grown up as a member of the fantasy sports industry. So when you say the pioneer thing, I still feel like a young guy for the most part. But man, oh man, Emil, it's it's been there through a lot of life events. It's been there through a lot of changes of the old fantasy sports industry, and
That's great.
I'm thankful for it every day.
You also had a finalist article in the Writers Association under humor a few years back.
Yeah, 2008, I think it was. And
yeah, that's pretty good.
Again, when I got that mock, I meant to mention this. You said I was a broadcasting major.
Yes.
I've never written anything in my life when I applied for that fantasy sports writer job at Mock Draft. He was looking for a writer, and again, it turned into more than a writer. It turned into monitoring drafts, doing customer support.
Yeah, it probably helped you actually, because he probably realized, oh my gosh, this guy can give me a broad base of capabilities which he needed.
Well, and that's what I offered him when I said I basically begged and pleaded at that interview. That's what I offered him. I said I know this is a writer job, but look, I'll work full-time hours for part-time wages just to get my foot in the door for something like this. And
yeah,
it paid off. And again, I took writing classes in high school and college, but I think we can all agree I'm not the smartest guy going. So I basically self-taught myself to write. And I think I became a pretty good writer. And again, I was nominated for an award. That career-wise, that's still one of my, even though I didn't win and I was a finalist, that's still one of the things that, that's still one of the things that sticks out to me as one of my proudest accomplishments, being that, the broadcasting major who, self-taught himself for the most part, was nominated for an award. And I really am thankful for that opportunity. I was so mad when I didn't win. Even to this day, I get a little upset that I didn't win that thing. I should have won, dang it all. But sour grapes all these years later. But now I see these awards, these FSWA awards. I couldn't even compete. The quality of writing and the content has gotten so much better over the years. When we talk about how much the industry has grown, I couldn't hang with these guys to save my life anymore. So I guess I'm lucky to have that one nomination 12 years ago, because no one will ever take that away from me. But I'd have no chance these days.
Well, finalist is pretty impressive, because you get a lot of writers. I'm a vice president of the Writers Association since day one, and we get like 1,000 articles every year, over all the categories. There's just a lot of content there. So being a finalist is impressive.
No,
so you got any more stories that you want to throw out before you have to go diaper a baby?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I can hang around all day to avoid doing that. I think one of the main ones is, remember, one of the stories I always tell people is you and I out in Vegas that time. I sit at the bar, and I always said the hottest I ever felt it was I went out to Vegas for a fantasy football contest in August. That's probably the hottest I've ever felt. But remember that time when we were launching that contest, and you and I we were working so hard. I just remember we'd run it. I worked in my hotel room probably 23 of the 24 hours a day. And I remember I'd run into you in person, and we just both looked like such zombies. That's one of the craziest stories I can ever remember.
The early days of the FFWC, we'd take the boards back. We didn't have computers at the draft site, so we'd do the boards, and we'd go back in the room, and we just had boards all over the place, putting them in the system, and we were tired. It was tiring.
Yeah, that's when my fantasy league was hosting the FFWC league. So
Mm-hmm.
I went out there to help with that process, and man, that was craziness. I think of, again, when I talk about these next couple of weeks turning me into a zombie, it will never be that bad again. But we pulled it off somehow, didn't we, buddy?
Yeah, we did. It was, I remember it was funny too, because Sunday morning that one time, Ian comes to my room, and he goes, Ian Ritchie, he's on his phone walking around, Ian, he's like, hey, come on down. We got the party started in the morning. It was like 9 or something. Says, Ian, the phone's ringing off the hook. People are making sure their lineups are in. I don't know whether we were still putting boards in. I don't think we were, but I couldn't move. And he's like, well, people want to see you down there. People want to see you down there. And I'm like, you don't want their lineups in? I mean, I was kind of mad at him. And he kept, he was just circling around the room. Finally, he just left, and we got it all done. But those were tough times. Those were stressful, exhausting time when you got people calling you on the phone and screaming at you, and you want to get it all in, and the game starts in an hour and a half, and you want everything clean.
Well,
you want it all clean.
And I kind of mentioned it. To this day, my fantasy league has a 50% ownership of what's called the Fantasy Championship, where we have 4,800 teams. It's a partnership with Real Time Fantasy Sports. I love those. I love those guys down in St. Louis. But I monitor most of those drafts. I'm in the draft room. I'm still doing the same thing I was 15 years ago, and and it's probably something you're good at too. But I have a skill with of dealing with mad people where I don't let it bother me. A lot of people, it just kind of wears on them and stuff, and they can't handle it.
You and I are very similar, because a lot of stories you've talked about are very similar. And when early on, I didn't want to interrupt you, and you were talking about draft support, and I just oh my God, how many years have you had a draft? You got 12 people in the draft, and I used to joke with people, what's the probability of at least one person not being able to log in, not showing up in a 12-team draft? It's 100%. I don't care how much money they paid to be in the draft, and you do it really well. And you even the magazine drafts. It's like the draft starting in 38 seconds. The draft starting. It's a mock draft. It's in a magazine. It's not like you need it for content. And there's 3 people that still haven't shown up in the draft. And then they walk in at like 30 seconds into the draft or a minute or two, and we have to delay their pick, or then all of a sudden the phone rings. I can't log in. And I just I
will say...
Go ahead.
I will say that's one thing that's gotten a lot better over the last 15 years is people's use of technology. I mean, we were talking about how the phones have become common, but people are a lot better at technology than they used to be. I will say the internet, computers, when I first started at Mock Draft Central back in the day, it was like talking to my grandpa, trying to get him on with some of those folks. and these days, there are people, I would say it's more people that forget versus that are having technical problems. Hey, I can't log in, or maybe, they forgot their password or something. Back in the day, it was just people that could not figure out how to work their computer. There's legit times where I'd have to call and the guy would ask me how to turn his computer on. And
whoa!
Are you kidding? Yeah. So I haven't dealt with one of those in a decade probably, but we've come a long way with with how well people use technology. Thankfully, people still are late. People still don't show up, but it's more of a forgetfulness type thing more than they're sitting there screaming at their computer.
If I'm doing if I'm in a mock or something like this time of the year and I get invited by anybody, I go in an hour before. I log in. I look at the board. I reset my computer so everything's off. I may then go away and come back in 10 minutes till or 5 minutes till. But it just drives me nuts that people actually don't even do that, and they'll walk in at 3 minutes after. And I remember guys like Kaplan. He used to drive me nuts. You remember Adam Kaplan?
Oh yeah.
He'd walk into the draft and say, "What are the scoring system here?"
Well, one of my all-time favorites is...
You're a professional, and you don't even know this. Go ahead. You tell your story.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. One of my all-time favorites is, I mentioned I'm a huge college football fan. But so, college football week 1 usually lines up with the biggest fantasy football drafts, Labor Day type weekend.
Ooh,
and then we were hosting for, I think it's still back at Mock Draft Central. It might have been when I was at Fanball. And we were hosting NFFC, who does the 3rd round reversal. So someone just paid, $1,500 to enter. And all my buddies are over watching college football. And I'm monitoring drafts. I can do that with people over. And this guy has paid $1,500. I called him. I was like, "Hey, what's wrong with the draft order?" And I'm like, "It's a 3rd round reversal, sir." And he just starts again, like how I just can keep calm. I have it on speakerphone. I paid $1,500. But he didn't take any responsibility whatsoever for the fact that he didn't know what he was entering.
Mm-hmm.
But he just blew up. I didn't know this. What the heck? Who would do such a thing? And my friends are just there laughing so hard in the background at how mad this guy was getting. But I don't know why I remember that story. And again, you name names, and I don't want to. I don't want to.
I didn't mean to do that. I just thought it was funny.
No. But there's a certain one of them early on at Mock Draft Central. There was a certain former Major League Baseball player who was a top prospect, and he played for the Tigers at one point. Let's just say his name rhymes with Schmeat Incaviglia or something like that. I mean, here I am, like a college kid getting my start in the industry. And I think he knew John Hansen, the guru, Mr. Incaviglia.
Yeah.
And again, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm monitoring a draft with Pete Incaviglia in it. And I used to watch this guy play with my dad. When I talk about that color TV or that black and white TV, I used to watch this guy with my dad. And Pete timed out on one of his picks and called, and he was irate. Yeah. It's like, am I really getting screamed at by Pete Incaviglia right now?
That is hilarious. Wow.
A young guy too. 2021. It's just like, whoa, not what I was expecting.
Yeah, those are. It's good to talk them down. I had another funny story. Second or third year of the WCOFF, we were at Rio. There were 600 teams. On teams had co-managers and stuff. And this one guy walks up like 45 minutes after the start of the draft. And he's late. And we had somebody drafting for him. We had surrogate drafters. And so they were in like the second or third round or something. And he walks up and he says, I can't freaking believe you started this draft early. What the hell are you guys doing? And you wanted to go, hey, Lou, evidently 599 of them showed up an hour early. But we didn't say that.
Yeah.
We just rushed him to his table. Right. Yeah, we rushed him to his table, and he looked at his 3 players on his team, and he goes, oh, I'm good. He sat down and finished the draft. He liked the 3 the guy had drafted him for. But, I mean, are you seriously going to yell and scream when you look in a room full of about 1,000 people and say that we showed up early?
I mentioned the Pete Incaviglia story. I think he got auto-drafted Marion Barber, the Cowboys running back, and I think that's the year he scored like 14 touchdowns.
Yeah, so it turned out okay.
If you're watching, Pete,
what you do is you say, well, gosh, Pete, look what you got. That's a fantastic pick.
Yeah,
You'll probably be happy with that. And they kind of start thinking, yeah, okay, I guess I'm all right. But, you got to make them happy, and it's important. And, I hate it when people, I'm watching the clock, and there's some guys, they wait till like 5 seconds. And, there's time delays and internet. It's not a perfect world out there. Why do you wait late to draft? Draft at 15, 10 seconds. Be prepared. Have somebody help you. Have a co-manager.
And thankfully, that's one of the things that have gotten better over, again, internet speeds, technology. Because, that used to be a problem.
Yeah.
But, man, oh, man, I'm a lot happier with the way things are now than back then.
Yeah, well, you do a great job, and you should be proud. And, again, you're a pioneer of fantasy sports. You've done a lot of great things and sweat equity. You worked your butt off. And the MFL 10s is really a fantastic thing that you were a big part of creating. And I think you should really be proud of that. I think it's really a fantastic modern, step that fantasy sports has taken, and you're a big part of it. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And again, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for guys like you. Thank you for all you've done, and thank you for having me today.
Hey, it's been a blast. Congratulations on being a pioneer, and we'll see what we can do another few years down the road as you raise a small child.
Yeah. I look forward to coming back. 16 years from now, we'll have to do a follow-up.
That sounds good to me. I like it. All right, thank you.
Book it.
Book
Thank
it.
you, bud.